Hi, Julian. With markets reaching all-time highs, we thought it could be interesting to touch on a few of the potential risks on the horizon. For instance, the U.S. fiscal deficit, which is projected to reach $2 trillion this fiscal year. The IMF recently warned that this poses a significant risk to the entire economy. So what are your thoughts on this?
So today, the US annual federal deficit stands at 6.7% of GDP. It is large relative to history, and that's despite the US economy being near full employment. This large fiscal deficit has pushed the national debt close to 100% of GDP, which is shy of the peak it reached after World War II. And looking forward, when accounting for Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid spending, but also higher interest expenses, the Congressional Budget Office projects the national debt to exceed its historic peak within the next 3 years. So why does it matter for our portfolio? Several reasons. One, large fiscal deficits have been very stimulative for the US economy, and they've led to a rising nominal tide with higher nominal GDP, higher corporate earnings, and higher asset prices. If one believes that such large fiscal deficits are not sustainable, that rising nominal tide will have to come out. Two, how much debt is too much? We don't exactly know, but at some point, investors in US Treasuries might demand higher rates to compensate for deteriorating US creditworthiness. And given that US Treasuries are the global risk-free asset, it could have large consequences on the valuation of all asset classes and on the US dollar. Finally, large fiscal deficits have geopolitical consequences. Neil Ferguson, the historian, reminded us recently that any great power that spends more on debt service than on defense will not stay great for very long. It's been true of the Ottoman Empire, it's been true of the British Empire, it's been true of the Ancien Régime in France. And this rule is being put to test today by the US with interest payment on the national debt exceeding the defense budget in 2024. So ultimately, the swell of public debt outstanding in the US is making sovereign paper a risky proposition in our opinion. And that's why, as we seek resilience in our portfolio, we believe that maintaining a strategic exposure to gold as a potential hedge, as a ballast, is becoming more and more relevant today.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the elections. It's an important topic, given a record portion of the world's population is expected to vote this year, with elections in more than 60 countries. So can you share a bit about how you're thinking about the elections when it comes to our strategies and if it impacts your approach?
We monitor those events closely. Elections, as we've seen in the past couple of weeks in the UK or in France, create a lot of discussion, a lot of noise, but often little signal for our portfolio. Remember that most of the companies we own, especially in those geographies, tend to be what we consider global champions, companies that dominate a specific niche of the world economy, luxury product, Scotch whiskey, and are not overly reliant on a given geography or domestic policy. Our companies also tend to have long operating histories and a strong track record of navigating economic cycle, but also political cycles over time. So we monitor those events closely, but we also trust our portfolio companies and their management to find ways to create value for shareholders over time.
Well, thank you, Julian. As always, it was super informative. I appreciate your time and talk to you next month.
Thank you, Christina.